In this video, we're going to talk about applications of the ellipse. And in the first example, it talks about an arch. An arch has the shape of a semi-ellipse, which means half of an ellipse. And it's specifically talking about the top half. The arch has a height of 6 feet and a span of 20 feet. So if we imagine the full ellipse, it's telling us that it runs 20 feet this way, from here to here. And if we look at just the top half, which is the arch that the problem is talking about, that's this piece right here, it's saying the height is 6 feet. Now, it says find the equation for the ellipse and use it to find the height to the nearest hundredth of a foot when you're 5 feet from the center. So, if I call the center 0, 0, and they want us to find the height when I'm 5 feet from the center, if I come out 5 feet this way, it's asking me to find the height here. So we would know the x is 5, and we're trying to find the value of y. So if we find the equation, we can plug in 5 for x and solve for y. Well, as in the previous video, in order to find the equation of an ellipse, first we have to determine which way the major axis is running. Is it running horizontally or vertically? If we look at this, it is definitely running horizontally because horizontally it has a length of 20 and vertically it would have an axis that's 12 because 6 on half and then 6 on the bottom half. So this is going to run horizontally, which means our equation is going to be x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared is equal to 1. So we need to figure out what our a and b values are. Well, our a is the distance from the center out on the major axes. From the center out on the major axes, that's a distance of 10 because the entire distance of the major axes is 20. Half of it from the center out would be 10. So I would have x squared over 10 squared, which is 100, plus y squared over, now we got to find b. B is 6. From the center out on the minor axes would be 6. So I would have 6 squared, which is 36, is equal to 1. So here's our equation that we're going to use. This is the equation of the ellipse that we drew. Now, it wants us to find the height, which would be the y value, when we come out 5 feet from the center. So that's when x would be 5. So I'm going to plug in 5 for x and solve for y. If I plug in 5 for x, that's going to be 5 squared, which is 25. And I would have 25 over 100. And 25 over 100, if we reduce it, would be 1/4. So now we have to solve this, that we plugged in x is 5, we have to solve this for y. So I'm going to subtract 1/4 from both sides. So I get y squared over 36 is equal to 3/4. Because when I take 1/4 from 1, that gives me 3/4. Now I'm going to multiply both sides of my equation by 36. So I can isolate the y squared. I'm going to get y squared is equal to 27 when I multiply both sides by 36. So when I square root both sides, I get plus or minus the square root of 27. And because we're talking about distance here, we're not going to worry about the negative square root. We're only going to look at the positive. And when we put that in on the calculator, we're going to get approximately 5.20 feet when we round it to the nearest hundredth. So what this is telling me, if I come out from the center 5 feet this way, I'm going to come up, and that's going to be 5.2 feet in height. So my y value at that point would be 5.2. Okay, in this example, it talks about a semi-elliptical archway that has a height of 20 feet and a width of 50 feet. So just like before, we're going to only talk about the top half of the ellipse. So imagine this is the top half of the ellipse. It says it's 50 feet wide, which means if we look at this as the center, 0, 0, half of it's going to be from here to here is going to be 25 feet. And the other half is going to be 25 feet for a total of a span of 50 feet. It says the height is 20 feet, so from the center up is 20 feet. Now, it says, can a truck that is 14 feet high and 10 feet wide drive under this archway without going into the other lane? So, here's the picture, if you can imagine it. Let me see if I can draw a picture of a truck. This is the back of the truck. Here's the cab of the truck. And we've got our wheels. That's not bad. Okay, and then so it says the truck is 14 feet high and 10 feet wide. And that would be including the tires, 14 feet tall. Okay, so what we need to do is imagine that this truck is passing through this tunnel. And we want to see if it has to go in the middle or if it can stay in its own lane on the right-hand side. So if you imagine that we're looking at the tunnel and this is the back of the truck. So here are the wheels. This is the back of the truck. We want to see what the height is of the tunnel at this point right here so that we can see if it's taller than 14 feet. If it's lower than 14 feet, then the truck is not going to fit through there without shifting over into the center. So if the truck is 10 feet wide, what we want to do is find the value of y when x is 10. So we need to come up with an equation for this ellipse and then plug in x is 10 and see what we get out for y, and then from there we can make a decision. So, since we let the center be 0, 0, it's not going to be shifted. So this is going to be our equation. This is clearly an ellipse that has a horizontal major axis because across the bottom is 50 feet and from the center out is 20. And so if you count the bottom part too, that's 40. So 50 is bigger than 40, so this is going to run horizontally. So that means the bigger number is going to go under the x squared. So A is going to be 25 because that is the distance from the center out along the major axes. So I'm going to have 25 squared. And then for the minor axes, x says it's 20 feet this way. So this is going to be 20 squared. So I'm going to have x squared is over 625, because 25 squared is 625, plus y squared over 400, because 20 squared is 400. And so here is our equation for this ellipse with the center at 0, 0. So now what we have to do is plug in x is 10 to see what the height of the arch is at that point. So I'm going to plug in 10 for x. So I have 100 because that's 10 squared over 625 plus y squared over 400 is equal to 1. Now I'm going to subtract 1 minus 100 divided by 625 is going to give me 0.84. So I have y squared over 400 is equal to 0.84. Now I'm going to multiply both sides by 400. And I'm going to get y squared is equal to 336. So now I have to square root both sides. And I get plus or minus the square root of 336. Now, because we're talking about distance, we're only going to worry about the positive value of this. And when I take the square root of 336, I get that the height is 18.33 feet. So that means this right here, this height from here to here is 18.33 feet, which means if the truck is 14 feet, then it's going to be able to fit under the arch, which is 18 feet. So it is not going to have to shift over into the other lane to give it more height. We're going to be able to pass through without going into the other lane.